I've been outside for almost 2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours,
Yeah.
definitely. Because
Actually,
it was
longer than 2 hours, yeah. Just waiting.
The gathering is very ecumenical, not only in terms of religion, but in terms of political jurisdictions. I saw Jefferson Parish President Mike Guinea, who was one of the people walking out of there.
Slidell Mayor Caruso, lots and lots of...
Former Secretary of State Jim Brown, and of course a lot of congressmen, including Ron Dellums and the local congressional delegation.
Reverend Jesse Jackson.
See the New Orleans police, and of course the police were a very important part of the story of the Dutch Morial administration, that even beside the strike, he came out with a mission to try to reform and to change the police department, which was no easy task to do. And it took someone with his hard will to be able to do what he did.
As Margaret mentioned, from here, the procession will move to St. Louis No. 1 Cemetery, where the mayor's body will be laid to its final rest. More of the dignitaries here and pallbearers.
Now he's being buried in this, the closing days of the 1980s, and of course Morial was the dominant political figure in the New Orleans politics in the 1980s. Had he lived, I personally don't think that he would have been running for political office anymore, but I think he would have been a dominant factor behind the scenes, certainly into the 1990s. There's Louis Charbonnet officiating. His back turning right this moment. Former state representative who is
Currently an executive aide to Mayor Bartholomew.
That's right, right.
But also director of Charbonnet Funeral Home, which is his primary hat he's wearing right now.
If this were a traditional jazz funeral, once the procession gets outside, I suppose this would be the time for it to turn joyous. I don't think we saw a little bit of that actually as it was coming into the church, which traditionally isn't the time or the place.
I think actually traditionally you would wait until
right before you get to the cemetery.
After the cemetery, or just after the interment itself. But
or you'd march a few blocks with sort of a mournful sort of dirge, and then they changed the tone to something more lively. Yeah.
This is where I would have been, Margaret, Carol. Family was kind enough to invite me to be an honorary pallbearer today, but duty also called.
No, it occurs to me that just the fact of his importance as a former mayor certainly justifies all the attention, but the fact is that when Morial has been out of office for nearly 5 years now, and had he gone into a passive retirement, it might have taken some of the edge away, but the fact is he remained as a political player, and in a sense was what would pass for the loyal opposition in New Orleans, and was a newsmaker to the very end, and really, as we said earlier, as recently as 2 weeks ago with his dramatic non-announcement.
Warren, he was on Newsmakers. He was on your Sunday morning
just 2 weeks ago.
Talk
That's
show
correct.
just 2 weeks ago.
Exactly 1 week prior to his death. And I guess that's one tape I'll always keep.
If this were a British parliamentary system, we could call him the head of the shadow government over the last few years. And deserving of that status. This is in many ways also a celebration of New Orleans, all the things unique about New Orleans, the type of music that you have here. It really speaks for the city as well.
Well, I think it was Dr. Francis who said he so embodied so much of our own personality, of the city's personality and character.
And for all the hard edge that there was to him, he loved the ceremonial part of the job too. We saw him most in the ceremonial capacity, of course, at Gallia Hall during Mardi Gras, but he loved the business of toasting those kings and queens. And
he enjoyed every bit of it, even the tough part. He loved it. He loved every moment of it.
We were saying earlier, but my idea of a really gutsy experience is to be preaching to a crowd that includes Jesse Jackson in the audience. That has to be...
I think Archbishop Hannon was up to it.
It's like Jesse Jackson's being interviewed right now.
Yeah. As we mentioned, the mayor will be brought from here, the former mayor will be taken from here to St. Louis Cemetery number 1, where he will be finally laid to rest. We presume at that point is when the jazz part of the funeral will really take place. We are going to resume normal programming at this point, but we do want you, of course, to be reminded that News 8 New Orleans at 5, 6, and 10 o'clock tonight will have full coverage of all of today's activities as the city of New Orleans says farewell to what some people say was one of its most dynamic figures, if not its greatest mayor in the 20th century. Ernest, Nathan, Dutch Morial.
We do thank you for joining us. I'm Margaret Dubuisson.
And I'm Warren Bell with Errol aboard. Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you this evening.
Stay tuned to Channel 8 for the latest information. We now join our regular programming.